Hey everyone, apologies for the delays, but welcome back to our third session of today's Training Industry Leader Talk, L&D Strategies for Business Results in 2026. So sponsored by Biz Library, InfoPro Learning, Lone Rock Leadership, SweetRush, and WeLearn. So again, I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you here today. Again, before we get started though, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So for this session, please feel free to use that chat for any comments and submitting those questions. We will be addressing questions at the end of this session, but do not hesitate to plug those throughout. I love the engagement that has been going on through this event, so let's keep it going. Again, once the session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser, so please take a moment to share your feedback on the session and the speakers. And again, all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. Now, if this is the first Training Industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist making connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and podcasts. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms so we can continue the conversation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our third speakers for the day. We have Sriraj, who is the CEO of InfoPro Learning and a recognized voice on workforce transformation in the human plus AI era. And then we have Anu, who leads InfoPro's advisory practice, helping organizations redesign their workforce and learning operation models to support skill-based, outcome-driven strategies. So with that, take it away, guys.
Hello, welcome everyone. The skill conversation is happening everywhere, in every boardroom, every HR leadership conference, every offsite. But here is the question. Where are we? Where are we as L&D in that conversation? Are we leading it or are we waiting to be included? Let's hear from you guys with a quick poll.
And here are those results.
A lot of you said you're participating but not leading, which is absolutely fair. And many of you also said that you're informed after the decisions are made, but you're not at the table. 25% people said you're leading it, which is great. Congratulations. With that, Sriraj, let's move on.
Excellent.
So here
Thank
we
you.
are. What is really leading to this change?
Sure. Thank you, Anu. The poll was revealing. I just want to cross it up. Yeah, the poll was really revealing why the shift is accelerating. There are three forces that are converging right now, which is leading organizations to a skills-based design. The first one, as you all are aware in our world, the skill half-life keeps shrinking. And what was relevant for 3 years ago may not be relevant as much. Things are becoming obsolete. I can also argue that in certain functions and certain jobs, the skills life is reducing even further. So that's creating a lot of volatility. The second is the whole human and AI collaboration, where now human beings have to work with AI agents. And now even I see many use cases where multiple AI agents, not just one. And that is shaping the conversation on let's recreate our workflows and value streams. Organizations, many of our customers are redoing their processes and also training their team members on how to work with agents and how to lead this agentic environment. So that also is a trigger to this shift. And finally, because of this dynamic change in skills that impacts, how business will execute its strategy, business leaders are now seriously looking for outcomes from different L&D leaders, not just activity metrics. And so you can see how all these are three forces are pushing us in the direction of a skills-based design, because skills are the new currency that measures readiness of an employee, a business unit, or the whole organization to deliver to its strategy or its business results.
Thank you, Sriraj. That was very, very helpful. For everyone, what I have up on the screen right now are 4 different use cases of skill-based design. Personally, I'm very, very excited about the idea of skill-based design, and that's because this design brings us an opportunity to bring L&D in the flow of work of workforce transformation. With skill-based design integrating hiring, learning, career pathing, and performance management, learning is pretty much woven into the HR lifecycle. I'm just taking you back to the pre-skill era, which I think many of us are still living in. The model is pretty much request-based, right? The L&D organizations have been operating with a request-based model where you get a request from the business, essentially to create training, no matter what the reason behind that is. And in that model, L&D exists to serve the business. The business understanding of HR is that the team is here to service our training requests, right? And the business relevance and therefore the business context conversation is really, really limited. Sometimes the conversation is limited by the skills of the L&D person who's leading that request, and sometimes it is the credibility that the entire team brings, right? And that's because the team is not set up right. They're set up to create training for the business, right? And that's primarily been the challenge. With skill-based design, I feel like that completely changes because now L&D is embedded into the HR workflow. And with this model, L&D is not reactively servicing training requests. You are proactively creating a learning ecosystem that's anchored on skills and anchored on what every role needs, right? So I have a question for you once again. How many of you have a skill taxonomy today that's actively connected to at least maybe 2 of these use cases? Let's bring up the question, Liz. Yep, so we have a poll here. If you guys can respond to that. So looks like we have an equal mix.
Of all 3 categories.
Of all 3 categories. A lot of you said yes, a lot of you also said no, and a lot of you said not sure. Approximately an equal mix. So thank you for that. That was a great insight. Moving on. As we work with several different organizations on implementing a skill-based design, we saw various different traps where the organizations typically get stuck when they implement skill-based design. The first of those traps is the taxonomy trap, which is how do you really architect skills? You know, as you're thinking about the taxonomy, how should you really anchor it? How should you really, structure it? The many different organizations get stuck with the granularity, for example. Should the skills be applied at the level of role versus job family versus function? How many are too many? Some companies think, let's limit it to 15 because that will reduce complexity. And for others, even 50 is reasonable. Some are even implementing hundreds of skills for every role. After all that debate, a company spends X number of months, let's say 20 months or 12 months into building a skills taxonomy. Thousands of skills, they're all perfectly organized. And it feels like a lot of progress. But then when it comes to implementing those skills into the learning design, you feel restricted, right? It's not necessarily about the job architecture, but where you typically see the gaps is that the skills are not mapped to roles and they're not mapped to proficiency levels. And therefore, you don't know how to map learning programs to those skills. So essentially, skills without architecture, just like the slide says, it's just a spreadsheet. It just feels like it's really hard to deploy it into the learning ecosystem. Makes me think of this IT company that we were working with, that really loved this. They built a taxonomy. They spent months building all of that, thousands of skills across the organization, and nothing connected to nothing. Not hiring, not mobility, not performance. It just sat as a spreadsheet. So the first step for you as L&D folks is to align the taxonomy to roles, define proficiency levels, map programs, right? And that's because, just because somebody says taxonomy is done, don't consider it done. You as L&D folks, you have to do that job of connecting the dots. Trap number 2 is the technology trap. A lot of organizations buy a platform and they feel like their problem is solved. But typically the platform vendors, what they don't tell you is that technology sits on the top of the workflows and the operating model. If your workflows are not built for skill-based design, then tech is only automating the model that you currently have, which is the older way of working. And therefore, it doesn't bring any additional value. Specifically, when you implement a skills-based platform, you need to think about the workflows for implementing your skills taxonomy, the workflow for assessing skills, the workflow for developing those skills. How are your learning programs going to work in conjunction with those skills? And then reporting on the workforce readiness based on those skills. Just buying a skills platform, integrating to LMS is not going to do that job. You have to connect the dots from how those skills are showing up for the learners versus what programs do they have available to really enable themselves on those risks. And we'll come to operating model conversation also in a little bit. What we've seen organizations do is that they spend millions on technology and then they realize that it's primarily a broken process that they have digitized, right? So think about the design, think about the design of that technology as well. But before that, think about the process and the operating model. That's essentially what leads to this trap. The third trap that I have here is the performance visibility trap. You've implemented skills, you've connected learning programs to those, but you can't see performance. You don't have data available. You can't see who's doing well on those skills, who's not doing well, right? As an organization where you are. The performance data lives in business, right? It lives in the sales operations. It lives in engineering. It lives in finance. And L&D is usually blind to how those performance gaps really show up at work, right? So equally important, we have to find a way to measure these skills and we have to find a way to get performance visibility. And that's what this trap is all about. I promise the fourth trap here, which is the last trap, is the relevance trap. For many, many years, we saw this conversation about L&D needing to own the business outcomes. They are not seen as a performance enabler. And that's primarily because of the model in which L&D has functioned all these years. L&D often gets sidelined when organizations adopt skill-based design as well. They prioritize hiring, recruitment, they prioritize career pathing, and that's a missed opportunity for L&D. When learning is anchored on skills, it enables skill progression, it enables readiness for future roles, and it also enables a continuous learning culture that we've been looking to establish for so many years, right? L&D must establish its strategies to organization's skill agenda. It's an important thing to do. And that is the key to driving real value and becoming a core enabler for workforce transformation. Do you guys relate to these traps? Let's ask this question. Which trap do you relate to? Where do you feel your organization is today? or is it all of them? Interesting. Seems like about 50% are at a bit of all, and rest is pretty much divided. The biggest category from the rest seems to be skill visibility trap.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. Any comments on that, Sriraj? You wrote about skill visibility a lot recently. Seems to be a topic that you are really passionate about.
I did. I was thinking about this, Anu. Like, I started by saying how skills are the real new currency. So how currencies are valued and how you create a digital footprint of how the currencies are moving is very important. And same applies to skills. I feel like while we create some kind of a database around skills, but if we don't drive performance visibility from that database and we don't get access to business data, then there is no way we can connect the currency to the workflows that we want to drive, which is a skill gap leads to a learning intervention, or a learning intervention which needs to be in the flow of work. Both are, aspirations in our community. And I feel like if we can't get performance data, then we can't do those things as effectively as we would want to.
Absolutely. I wasn't really encouraging questions in the middle of the session, Sriraj, but I have a question from Heidi here. And she says she's especially interested in how to get better at the performance piece, how people are actually demonstrating skills longer term after development, which I believe is a learning design question. How do we design learning in a way that people are able to practice those skills and also the learning is carried on long term? Do you have anything to add there?
I think we all, when we don't have causation, we move to correlation. It's an easy, lower hanging fruit to move to start a dialogue, at least at some point, to look at correlations. And then, when there's more maturity on your data sets, then you can look at causation. There is a huge challenge in the infrastructure that most organizations have, especially the technology infrastructure. And we even don't have access to that because our IT teams are actually owning that infrastructure. So, for instance, Salesforce or Jira or your engineering, applications and supply chain applications where real performance and works are being produced, which are giving you the signal as to how this employee is doing. So I feel like there is a path to it. That path has been implemented in other domains. And now, because skills as a currency is becoming so important, it's being forced now to us to implement similar solutions that other functions like IT, tech, supply chain have implemented. So we do have a path. We in InfoPro call it the intelligence layer. So we have a blueprint around that, and that could be a separate conversation, maybe a different webinar at some point. And therefore, the point that we were making, Anu was making, is the problem is just not the skills, but the problem is the operating model. And how does L&D actually work? What decisions do we own? And how do we connect to the business? How do we get visibility to performance? There are answers, but it's not an easy solution, as easy as let's develop a training program or let's hire a bunch of trainers to launch an event. So the operating model conversation is a much deeper conversation, which will have all these dimensions to it. And I'll have Anu explain the operating model that we feel applies very well and has potential to lead to success.
Thank you for explaining that, Sriraj, and tying in the loose ends here. So absolutely, the skill-based design is very, very important. It is important to get the right taxonomy in place, map it to the right roles, create a good inventory for each of the roles, map learning programs to that. So all of those steps are super, super important. But skill-based design is not just a framework that we are borrowing as an L&D team. It's not just one of the things that we can now anchor ourselves around. I feel like it's a big, big change. The reason why it is big is because the other use cases, for one, are connecting to that. So you have to sit in that ecosystem so that everything ties in together. It is one unified workflow that's working across HR. And you're able to contribute with data, with performance data that really becomes an important part of, everything else that the HR does. For example, how do they do performance management? It has to come from skills, right? And we as learning people are only enabling performance by helping people learn better, right? By giving them various different programs. But what is important is that, for one, it has to fit in, like I said, in the overall workflow. But two, it's not just a framework that we imbibe and now we start working on it. Everything, the way we organize L&D team changes completely, right, to work in this model. The way our team structure is established, the way the governance is established, everything changes. So it's the ways of working, it's the decision rights, that need to change, which is what you're calling an operating model. Let me take everyone to this slide where we define the 3 different layers of this operating model. You talked a little bit about intelligence, but before that, there's a strategy layer. Mm-hmm. And the strategy layer essentially is where, we're defining the capability needs. Moving from the question that we used to ask, which is, what training do you need? And why do you need that training? And what are the business triggers behind it? Now we're talking about what capability gaps will put the business at risk. What is it that you need for today? And what is it that you need for tomorrow that we have to service, as L&D people? So we are really talking about building a capability agenda here. And that's what L&D puts L&D more work stream than just into workforce planning than just fulfilling orders, right? So strategy is what is important here. We will also, at a later time in this presentation, see what the key components of this strategy layer are. But when you think about strategy, think about what will really move the needle for the business. What skills are needed for today and what skills are needed for tomorrow. The second layer that we have here is the intelligence layer. This is where you integrate signals. This is essentially the layer where the visibility trap gets gets solved. The intelligence means connecting skills data, performance signals, and demand forecasting. Seeing gaps before they become fire, before they become crisis, right? So this requires building data relationships outside of L&D's traditional domain, which means partnerships with IT, partnership with ops, partnership with business units, and access to their workflow systems. Skills will build performance plus demand. All of this together equals foresight. And this is the layer that builds performance visibility. So that's layer 2. And then there is layer 3 here, which is execution. Execution essentially is not just about delivering training. It is about building targeted programs, targeted interventions that flex with demand, right? So how we design learning programs, we may be able to borrow a lot from what we have traditionally done. But now, since your starting point is skills and starting point is building each of those skills at various different proficiency levels, even the execution layer is much tighter. The way you design programs is much tighter. Even to your question, Heidi, it is, what you're asking is a learning design question. How do you sustain that learning? And we have, this webinar may not be the right topic for that, but that's where we come in as Info for Learning experts. The right learning, right people, right time is what will bring continuous recalibration as well. It's not a one-time intervention for any of
I also feel, Anu, this is where the long drawn promise of personalized or adaptive learning comes to fruition. Because if you have the data points that the intelligence layer speaks to, then you can serve a very targeted training intervention or content based on where that particular employee is, and not treat it as doing everything to a cohort or a large set of employees. And we have seen there's a lot of efficiency gains, as you all know, in moving in that direction with personalized learning. The other thing that comes repeatedly in our conversations, Anu, is well, if we are working, let's say, spending a lot of time in Salesforce or in my supply chain or ERP system or in the field, can my learning follow me in that flow of work, right? And I feel that's what intelligence layer allows you to do. If you go back, Anu, I want to just talk a little bit there, is it's not just receiving information from source systems, but also think about it. The new intelligence layer is also about capturing information of each employee, because if AI is going to be used as effectively as we want, then the context that AI gets is going to be important about the employee's performance, the feedback that the employee has gotten from the manager, the employee, where the employee is in his role or her role, the gaps in skill, and so on and so forth. So a lot of signals are captured by this intelligence layer that then informs your AI agents who are in the workflow, or informs your learning management system to start with the right intervention at the right point. Oh, we lost your voice, Anu.
I'm sorry. I am sorry. I had muted myself because I was coughing, but but thank you for letting me know. Very important, Sriraj. I believe performance, we've been talking as L&D professionals, we've been talking about measuring performance for the longest time, but a skill-based design definitely brings us in that direction as well. Integrating all of those three layers here, that's essentially what the operating model is. There's a strategy where you define capability needs. There's intelligence where you measure, do skill assessments, in various different ways, and then also provide targeted interventions to improve those skills. What lies under this essentially is a 6-dimension model, which helps do assessment or helps diagnose the current state that you have in your organizations at this point in time for all three layers. For example, for strategy, on skill framework, where are you? Do you have a skills architecture, taxonomy? Do you have an inventory for various different roles? Have you defined proficiency levels? Those are the questions that we answer at the strategy level, or the gaps that we fulfill, right? The process piece is also, the process design piece, I would say, is an important piece to consider when you're defining that new strategy. Does your demand planning process align with skill-based design? What do you need to change? What do you need to change in your intake process? While a lot of the other processes which are more tactical, like classroom management or trainer management, may still stay the same, but the governance changes big time. The analytics change big time, right? So all of that definition goes in here, right, at the time when we're defining strategy for the new L&D organization for any company. The governance is the third piece that I've talked about it a little bit, but the biggest piece is here is that as L&D, what decision rights do you have? Where do you play with the business to define what needs to be built? How will you really enhance skills? What will change in the new way of working? And what are your SLAs going to be? In our experience, as we implement a new operating model, what we've seen is, like I said, it's not a plug and play of a skills framework, but everything, the way you organize your team changes, the skills that you need in the L&D organization also changes, and the way you integrate processes change. So So designing the new strategy is really important. And then a couple of things that feature under intelligence in terms of really measuring the progress on the skills is analytics and the technology. Technology is what enables, and analytics is where you define how are you going to capture, what are you going to capture, at what frequency you will capture that. And that also feeds into the governance layer that you have. The third piece here is execution, which essentially is learning design. Really important, still stays important, still the key component of everything that L&D delivers to, the performance promise that L&D delivers to, which is the blended design, spaced learning, spaced interventions. How do you design and how do you measure progress? And how do you measure, let's say, 6 months down the line and 1 year down the line on, how the skill enhancement has taken place, where the white space on skills is, year on year. So all of that assessment becomes a part of that. So essentially 6 things. The big change that we see is that we're not just talking about business alignment anymore. For years as L&D, we've talked about how do we align to business, what are the different KPIs and how will we report progress and things like that. With this framework, everything falls into one flow. We start with skills, we measure on skills, we report on skills. So that's pretty much what the layers are. They tell you what to build, and the dimensions tell you where you are currently, what's broken, and what needs to be fixed. Any other colors you would like to add, Sriraj, and else I can just move forward.
That is good. Yeah,
and we can integrate it all.
I believe there's a lot to unpack in that operating model, which could lead us into multiple webinars. But a lot of us find ourselves in one of these 3 stages, largely in the now stage where we are doing something around skills-based design. Either we are adopting a taxonomy, we have bought a skills platform, or we have brought a learning platform which is giving us skills. The different stakeholders have different understanding of what does it really mean and what benefits it would give to business, right? But we have, as learning and talent development leaders, we have to be very clear that we are moving from just being a service provider to the future stage of being a workforce strategy partner. So the real talent intelligence needs to sit with learning and design development team. And that will allow you to look at the capability gaps different functions and groups have. And based on that gap, you can then design immediate interventions. And so you're not serving a need of, let's do these 5 training programs. You're really saying, we predict that there will be a 15% gap in this specific area of performance, and we want to provide these interventions ahead of time. And that's when the business partnership becomes really solid. And so we see a future, where all of us together can move from the left 2 boxes to the right box of being a truly workforce strategy partner.
I didn't realize this when we were, thinking about what's now versus what is going to come in future. But pretty much our poll results tell us that we are in the middle box.
Right.
So
that's right.
That was a great validation from everyone. Let's open up now for questions. What questions do you have? What challenges are you seeing in your companies in terms of making the skill-based design work?
Is there something on the chat? I'm not able to see that.
No, I'm trying to see if there's a Q&A box. Doesn't seem like so.
People have
there are comments in the chat for sure. Okay, some questions that are showing up. Can you show an example of a skills taxonomy? Absolutely, but may not be right now. Maybe a topic for another webinar. In fact, there's a series of webinars on skill-based design where we very, very deeply talked about skills taxonomy, and they are on our website. There's a masterclass that exists, a 4-part masterclass. It is on our website, www.infoprolearning.com. And I think each of those webinars are an hour each, and they go deep into what skills taxonomy is, how can you structure, what the examples look like, and maybe a couple of case studies as well.
Yeah, it's a great masterclass, actually. A lot of people took it.
Yes, this is from Sandra Sester in our team. There's another question. I think it's sustaining learning, but also measurement. Did they learn or improve what we wanted them to learn? Are they performing at the higher level because they have now learned the skills? That seems to be the key theme, Sriraj, of this conversation. How are we measuring performance?
Yes. Most measurement systems sit with business because business do measure performance of their function and specific team members. And if it's a sales team, it could be sitting in Salesforce. Marketing, it could be sitting in HubSpot. Supply chain team, it could be sitting in your SAP system and things like that. So when you think about how does the CFO or the CEO have access to this data? Let's think about that. They have some dashboards and reports that organizes around functions and groups. And we are looking at a drill down of a subset of the data that points to an employee. Now, when you have that data, what it's saying is that this function or this employee has moved from this level of performance to, say, an advanced level of performance, or vice versa. Another set of data that comes really handy is, can you synthesize the performance management data? So if you have goals or KPIs or OKR systems that sit outside of their business systems, then even that we can infer from that data set as to how the employee is progressing. So that allows you to make correlations. There are many reasons why an employee could be doing better. You can also make an argument that the business environment was really good this year, and so they're performing better, or it was the manager who did all the job. But end of the day, at a macro level, you can still make good correlations, and that can give confidence to business that, yes, we are moving the needle on performance. The other thing that I've seen companies do is now implement this, what we call, in part of our solution in our stack, is the digital twin of your talent organization. And we call it the intelligence layer. And so this is the layer that sort of does all the plumbing with your existing systems. So you may have Cornerstone or LinkedIn Learning or your Lattices or Gloats of the world. And all of this is just, we do the plumbing, which is predefined. And then there is an ontology that sits on top of that plumbing, which is, okay, whatever data is designed in your organization, how do we read it? How do we normalize it? And how do we make sense of it in a language that we both can understand? And then that goes back into some kind of dashboarding system that you will need. And pretty much we continue to implement that and get it better and better till you feel really confident about the performance visibility that you're gaining from the intelligence layer.
Absolutely. To your point, Sriraj, Priya is saying that she has one challenge that she faces is that performance often cannot be connected to L&D efforts. And there are often other tactics that are used to performance, which is also the point that you made. In my experience, I mean, I think when I work with several organizations, I often encourage people to think about performance as a holistic performance. So for any organization-wide change management program as well, we don't try to categorize the reasons why that program was successful, right? If a program is successful, it is successful. Similarly, if a skill is built, it is built. training is a contributor to that. It's hard to say whether training contributed 20%, 30%, 40% to that overall success. But I think for any initiative, it's important to look at success as a holistic success, and training is a part of that, just like any other initiative, So,
and I also like, I started seeing the chat now. I'm also like Heidi's response that if L&D start, you start somewhere, and if you start with a strategic L&D plan, and now the skills is the currency that gives you an angle in these conversations. I think the business starts appreciating that a lot more. I really like Heidi's approach to it in her own environment. Yeah.
Right. Andrea is saying most of our trainings are onboarding technical skills, and afterwards it's very difficult to get access to employees once they're on the job, which is what you were explaining, in terms of how you can get signals from the business to measure that performance. I think the skill-based design enables that very, very well.
Correct.
How do we shift from order taking or training request to strategy partner when that has been the norm? Is from Nikki. Again, Nikki, a shift that I think automatically, naturally happens the moment you move to skill-based design, because now you're talking about what are the gaps across the company, what skills have white space, where do we need to, give better learning programs, more learning programs, where do we need to give more opportunities to people to practice, right?
Yeah.
So
I also feel, sorry, Anu, just one point I had there. That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think at some point we start feeling like, are we punching above our weight category here? Right. And in any role you have these doubts. But I feel like if you start having these conversations and start bringing business in this conversation, then I think you have amazing strength to change the narrative, change direction of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's also a narrative change. Megan says, can you give me the name of the webinar on skill taxonomy again? It's a skills masterclass, Megan. You'll find it on our website, www.infoprolearning.com.
And Ravi just posted
the link in this chat. Yeah. Leonardo says, in medtech industries, we must align education and marketing, but HR plays a role in soft skills development. Which is the best way to match them? Not sure if I follow the question, Leonardo. Best way to match soft skills with what? Maybe you want to throw some light on your question. Miriam says, what skills does the L&D, I'm hoping, Miriam, that's what you wanted to write, L&D team needs to have to achieve a good strategy building and model operation? Many different skills. Very good question. Many different skills. In fact, we recently defined a whole bunch of skills that any advisory role needs.
Yes.
L&D or non-L&D. L&D, of course, has its own function-specific stuff.
I think, Mariam, if you just see your contact, we'll share that list also with you. We have a very good program on advisory skills. In fact, not just limited to L&D, but in general, many organizations are trying to move the skills conversation for their professional services team so that they can convert or transform their professional services team into more of a consultant and advisor. And so this program has been valuable for most of these companies.
Yes. Yeah. So just get in touch for more. You can get in touch with us through our website, or even maybe leave an email, and one of us should be able to get to connect with you guys. We can continue this conversation, very, very passionate conversation for all of us. So just get in touch and we can have a deeper dialogue about any of the topics that you may be interested in.
Beautiful. Yeah, we are out of time. Is there anything else you would like to say to the audience, though, before we wrap it up and take our second break or our third break? I don't even know what break we're at.
I want to grateful for everyone to join us. Thank you, Liz, for organizing this. And we will follow up all the other questions. If there are contacts, we'll definitely follow up with those details. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, great session.
Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Yes. No, great session, everybody. This was very engaging and I feel like I learned a lot. So let's keep it going with our next two sessions. So again, we'll be taking about a 14-minute break. Up next, we have Paul for their session sponsored by Liz Library, aligning L&D initiatives with 2026 business goals. So again, in a moment, I'm going to end this session. You can join our next session by returning to that event lobby and going to session tab. So I hope you all stick around for our next session, which will begin at the top of the hour. See you guys there. Bye, everybody.